I never thought I would discover the greatest betrayal of my life while fighting for breath in a hospital bed. I was lying there, my lungs filled with fluid from pneumonia, when I heard my daughter Karen's voice speaking in a hushed tone in the hallway with her husband, Jason. They thought I was asleep, but I have always been a light sleeper. Now that she's admitted, it's the perfect time, my daughter said. My in-laws already have all the paperwork ready. We just need to transfer everything today. My heart raced, but I feigned sleep. For 45 years, I had built that house brick by brick alongside my late husband. It was the only thing I had left of him. My name is Eleanor Harrison. I am 72 years old, and I thought I knew my own daughter until that night at General Hospital in Chicago. Karen is 45 and was always the apple of my eye. When her father died 8 years ago, she became my only real family. Jason, her husband of 4 years, never sat right with me, but I tolerated him for her sake. Jason's parents, Sylvia and Charles Miller, were people who gave me a bad vibe from day one, but I never interfered in Karen's decisions. I was always a polite, respectful woman, but politeness has its limits. The pneumonia had attacked me without mercy. At 72, my lungs didn't respond like they used to. Dr. Roberts had explained that it was serious, that I needed to be hospitalized for at least a week. Karen cried when she received the news. She hugged me like she did when she was little. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of everything," she had told me. And boy, was she taking care of robbing me. The next day, I pretended to know nothing when Karen arrived with that mask of feigned concern I had known since she was a teenager. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" she asked, kissing my forehead with cold lips that used to bring me warmth. I watched her carefully. She couldn't look me in the eye, just like when she lied about her grades in high school. "I'm better, honey, but tell me, how are things at home?" She stammered a vague answer about everything being fine. In that moment, my suspicion was confirmed. My own daughter was robbing me while I fought death, but she didn't know that her mother was always sharper than she appeared. In my youth, I worked as a legal secretary at a law firm. I learned to read between the lines, to detect lies, to understand when someone was taking me for a ride. Those skills are never forgotten. Karen always believed I was a simple woman, dedicated only to the house and family. I never told her about the accounting courses I took in secret, about the savings I managed for decades, or the financial decisions I made when her father thought he controlled everything. Women of my generation learned to be strong in silence. Lucy, the nurse who had been caring for me since day one, noticed something was wrong. "You look worried, Mrs. Harrison," she said with that sweetness only people who genuinely care about others possess. I smiled and replied, "Sometimes we discover that people aren't who we thought they were, dear." She nodded understandingly. During the afternoon, I pretended to sleep again and heard Karen talking on the phone on the balcony. "Yes, Sylvia, everything is ready. The house is yours now. She'll never find out." I felt a pain in my chest that had nothing to do with pneumonia. It was the pain of a mother who had just lost her daughter forever. That night, while the machines monitored my vitals, I remembered every sacrifice I had made for Karen. When she divorced her first husband at 25, she came to my house with her 2 small children, Dylan and Fiona. I took care of everything, the food, the laundry, taking the grandkids to school. For 4 years, I supported that entire family with my retirement pension. When she met Jason 6 years ago, I opened my home to him. I also paid for their wedding. I lent money that was never returned. I babysat my grandkids whenever they wanted to go out, and now, at the first opportunity they had, they were stealing the only thing that truly belonged to me. Karen arrived early the next morning bringing flowers from the market and that smile she used when she wanted something as a child. "Look, Mom, I brought your favorite carnations," she said, arranging them in the vase with nervous movements. "Have you spoken to the doctor? When are they discharging you?" I watched her arrange the flowers with hands I had taught to do, everything cook, sew, write, love, soon, honey. "The doctor says I'm already better." Karen sat in the chair next to my bed and took my hand. "Mom, when you get out of here, how about you come live with us? You don't have to worry about anything anymore. We'll take care of you." I looked her directly in the eyes, and for the first time in years, she looked away. When Karen went out to buy my medication, the visitor I was waiting for arrived. Attorney Leonard Vance had been a family friend for 30 years. He handled all the legal proceedings when my husband died. He helped me with the will. He was always a trustworthy person. When I saw him enter the room, with that serious expression I knew well. I knew my suspicions were founded. "Leonard," I said quietly, "I need you to help me with something very important." He approached, concerned. "What happened, Eleanor?" I took a deep breath and said something that would change everything. "I need to verify if I am still the owner of my own house." Leonard's face changed completely. During 30 years of friendship, he had seen me through good times and bad. He knew me well enough to know I wouldn't ask that question if I didn't have serious reasons. "Eleanor, is there something I should know?" I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling that the words I was about to say would alter my life forever. "My daughter is plotting something behind my back. I heard a conversation I shouldn't have. I think they are robbing me while I am sick." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any word. Leonard remained thoughtful for a few minutes, then pulled out his cell phone. "Let me make some calls. I'll have answers for you tomorrow morning." As he prepared to leave, I stopped him. "Leonard, one more thing. This stays between us until I decide what to do." He nodded gravely. "Of course, Eleanor, but I want you to know something. In all the years I've known you, I've never seen you be wrong about people. If you suspect something, you're probably right." Those words gave me the peace of mind I needed. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't paranoid, I was being betrayed, but at least now I had someone on my side. That afternoon, Jason arrived with his 2 small children from his first marriage. The kids, Sophie, 8, and Ethan, 6, ran toward my bed with that genuine joy only children possess. "Grandma Eleanor, we brought you drawings," Sophie shouted, showing me a sheet full of colors. For a moment, I forgot everything. These children truly loved me. They knew nothing of the adults' intrigues. "They are beautiful, my love," I told them, hugging them with all the strength the IV tubes allowed. Jason stood in the doorway, watching. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Harrison?" he asked with that forced courtesy he always used with me. "Better, Jason, much better," I replied, staring at him. During 4 years of marriage to Karen, Jason had never managed to fool me completely. He was an ambitious man, the kind who always looks for the easy path to get what he wants. When he married Karen, I knew it wasn't for love. Karen had a house, a stable job, and a mother who had accumulated some savings over a lifetime of work. That was what really interested Jason. But what he didn't know was that this mother also knew how to defend herself when necessary. The children stayed playing on my bed while Jason went out to talk on the phone. From my window, I could see him in the parking lot speaking animatedly with someone. Sophie curled up beside me. "Grandma, is it true you're coming to live with us?" she asked with those bright little eyes. My heart tightened. This innocent girl had no idea what her parents were planning. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. It depends on many things." Ethan lifted his head from his coloring book. "I want you to come. Dad says you're going to have your own room and you'll be able to cook for us every day." The boy's words froze my blood. They already had everything planned. They had already decided my future without consulting me. When Jason returned, his attitude had changed. He was more relaxed, almost cheerful. He approached my bed with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Harrison, Karen and I have been thinking about when you leave the hospital. It makes no sense for you to return to that big house alone. We can take better care of you. My parents, Sylvia and Charles, are very excited to get to know you better. They have experience caring for elderly people." I smiled sweetly. That smile I had perfected over 72 years of life. "How considerate you all are, Jason. How lucky I am to have a family that worries so much about me." But inside, I felt something awakening. All my life I had been the woman who yielded, who accepted, who adapted to what others decided for her. I had raised Karen practically alone because her father was always working. I had sacrificed my dreams, my savings, my golden years to ensure she had everything she needed. I worked double shifts as a secretary to pay for her college. I sold the jewelry my husband had given me to buy her first car. I took a second mortgage on my house when she needed money for the divorce, so I could pay her legal fees. But what Karen and Jason didn't know was that their mother was no longer the same naive woman as before. That night, Nurse Lucy came to check my vitals. She was a young woman around 30 with that infinite patience needed to work in a busy public hospital. "Mrs. Harrison, can't you sleep?" she asked, noticing my eyes were open at 2 a.m. "I'm thinking about many things, dear," I replied. She sat for a moment beside me, something she probably shouldn't do, but did anyway. "Do you want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps to get things out. I told her about Karen, about the years of sacrifice, about the conversation I had overheard. Lucy listened without judgment, nodding occasionally. "Ma'am," she finally said, "I've been working here for 4 years. I've seen many families, and I'm going to tell you something you might not want to hear. There are children who only remember their parents when they need something. But I've also seen ladies like you find the strength to defend themselves." Her words stayed with me for the rest of the night. Strength to defend myself. I had that strength. I had just forgotten to use it. The next morning, Karen arrived punctual as always, but this time she didn't come alone. She brought Sylvia and Charles Miller, Jason's parents. From the first time I met them, something in my stomach churned when they were near. Sylvia was a 60-year-old woman who dressed as if she were 30, always talking about money, properties, and investment opportunities. Charles was worse, a calculating man who always looked at me as if evaluating how much I was worth financially. "Mrs. Harrison," Sylvia said with that sugary voice snakes use. "What a pleasure to see you doing better. We've come to meet you because Karen has told us so much about you." "Yes," added Charles, pulling a chair close to my bed, "especially about your beautiful house in Lincoln Park. Karen told us you built it yourself with your late husband." The way he said beautiful house put all my nerves on alert. During 40 years of marriage, I learned to read people, and these two had interest written on their foreheads. "It's a modest house," I replied calmly, "but it holds many memories." Karen moved nervously by the window. "Mom, Sylvia and Charles are real estate experts. They are helping us with some paperwork for when you get out of the hospital." There was the confirmation of what I had heard the night before. "What kind of paperwork?" I asked, keeping my voice serene, though inside I felt my stomach turning. Sylvia and Charles looked at each other quickly. "Administrative things, ma'am," Charles said, "to make it easier for Karen to help you with your finances if you need it in the future." I nodded as if I were the naive woman they believed me to be. How considerate. How lucky Karen is to have in-laws who care so much about the family. But inside, I was burning. Not with fever, but with a cold rage I had never felt before. These strangers were in my hospital room, planning to steal my assets while I fought to recover from an illness that nearly killed me. And worst of all, my own daughter was part of the plan. The daughter for whom I had sacrificed everything, for whom I had worked until my bones ached, for whom I had spent my last savings when she needed help with her divorce. That same daughter was now handing me over like a package to strangers who only saw a business opportunity in me. When they left, I pretended to be tired and closed my eyes, but my mind was working faster than ever. I remembered every conversation I had with Karen in the last few months, her questions about my documents, about where I kept important papers, about whether I had a will, her suggestions to modernize my way of handling money, to simplify my bank accounts. Everything had been preparation for this moment. Everything had been part of a plan to strip me of what belonged to me, but they had made a fundamental mistake. They had underestimated Eleanor Harrison, the woman who survived the poverty of her childhood, who worked since she was 14 to help her family, who raised a daughter practically alone, who faced her husband's death with dignity, and who kept going when the world crashed down on her. I was not a victim. I never really had been. I had just been waiting for the right moment to remind everyone what I was made of. That afternoon, my salvation arrived in the form of an elegant 60-year-old man. Attorney Leonard Vance had been a family friend for over 20 years. He had handled all legal matters when my husband died. He had helped me with paperwork. He had always been honest and direct with me. When I saw him enter the room with that worried expression only he knew how to wear, I knew someone had told him something. "Eleanor," he said after greeting me, "I received a very strange call from the Recorder of Deeds office. They informed me that there are movements regarding your home's title. Did you authorize any transfer?" There was the official confirmation of what I already knew. "No, Leonard, I haven't authorized anything," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. He leaned closer to my bed, lowering his voice. "Eleanor, someone is trying to transfer the ownership of your house to the names of Sylvia and Charles Miller via a quitclaim deed. The documents bear your signature, but I've seen your handwriting for years, and you didn't write this." I felt something inside me activate, like an engine that had been off, but suddenly roared to life. "Leonard," I said, looking him straight in the eye, "what can I do to stop this?" The smile that appeared on Leonard's face reassured me like nothing else had in days. Eleanor, you can do much more than you think, but I need to know. Are you sure you want to face this? Because once we start, there will be no turning back. I thought of Karen, of the years of love and sacrifice. I thought of my grandchildren, of the afternoons we had spent together. I thought of the life I had built and that they now wanted to snatch away. And then, with a clarity I hadn't had in years, I replied, Leonard, I've been polite and understanding for 72 years, but there are things that cannot be tolerated. Do whatever is necessary. For the next few hours, while Leonard made his calls from the hallway, I stayed alone in my bed processing what was happening. It wasn't just the theft of my house, it was the betrayal of the person I loved most in the world. It was discovering that all those years of devotion had been seen as weakness. It was understanding that Karen had never really respected me. She had only tolerated me as long as I was useful to her. But it was also something else. It was realizing that I still had power, that I could still make decisions, that I could still fight for what was mine. Karen returned at dusk with a bag full of medicine and that expression of a worried daughter she had been perfecting for days. How are you feeling, Mom? Did anyone come to visit you? I smiled with the same sweetness as always. Leonard came. He brought me some papers to sign. Karen's expression changed instantly. She turned pale, nervous. What kind of papers, Mom? Her voice had gone up an octave. Routine things, honey. Boring things for my age. Karen relaxed visibly, but I could see her mind working, calculating, wondering how much I knew. Jason arrived an hour later, and I immediately noticed the tension between him and Karen. They spoke in whispers by the window, thinking I couldn't hear them, but my ears were working perfectly. Are you sure she doesn't know anything? Jason asked. Impossible, Karen replied. She trusts me completely. Besides, she's very weak from the illness. Hearing my own daughter talk about me as if I were a helpless fool gave me the strength I needed for what was coming. For 72 years I had taken care of others. It was time to take care of myself. That night, when the hospital lights went down and the hallways fell silent, I stayed awake planning. It wasn't revenge I felt. It was justice. It was the need to regain my dignity, my autonomy, my right to decide over my own life. Karen had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. She had decided I was too old, too sick, too stupid to handle my own affairs. She was wrong, and I was going to make sure to show her. Leonard returned first thing the next morning with a folder full of documents. His expression was grave but determined. Eleanor, I have news, and none of it is good. He sat next to my bed and opened the folder carefully. Your house is indeed being transferred to Sylvia and Charles Miller. The signature on the documents is a rather crude forgery, but there's more. My heart raced. What else, Leonard? He sighed deeply. I also discovered that Karen has been using your name to apply for loans. Small ones at first, but increasingly larger. Your daughter has been putting you in debt without you knowing. The room spun for a moment. It wasn't just my house. It was my name, my credit, my clean history of a lifetime. Karen wasn't just stealing my assets. She was destroying me financially. How much do I owe? I asked with a trembling voice. Approximately $35,000, Leonard replied. But, Eleanor, there is something they don't know. He leaned toward me with a smile I hadn't seen on his face since he entered. You can cancel all of this. You can prove the signatures are fake. You can get your house back, and you can make them pay for what they've done. At that moment, something inside me ignited definitely. It wasn't just anger, it was pure determination. It was the strength of a woman who had worked all her life, who had raised a family, who had survived losses and tragedies, and who wasn't going to allow anyone to treat her like disposable clutter. Leonard, I told him with a voice I didn't recognize as mine, I want you to do everything necessary to stop this. Everything. And I want Karen and her accomplices to pay back every cent they have stolen. Leonard smiled with satisfaction. That is what I expected to hear from you, Eleanor. We are going to teach them a lesson they will never forget. As Leonard left to begin the legal proceedings, I remained alone with my thoughts. For the first time in days, I felt no pain in my chest. I didn't feel the weakness of the illness. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. The power to decide my own destiny. The power to defend myself. The power to show Karen, Jason, and his hateful parents that they had chosen the wrong victim. Because Eleanor Harrison had never been anyone's victim. She had only been waiting for the right moment to remind the world what she was made of. Karen arrived at noon with homemade food and that fake smile that no longer fooled me. "Look, Mom, I brought your favorite pot roast. I made it myself this morning." I took the container in my hands and felt the warmth of the food she probably really had made herself. For a second, I remembered the little girl who used to help me in the kitchen, who asked for the secrets of every recipe, who hugged me when something turned out well. That girl had died at some point and had been replaced by this calculating woman who now looked at me as if I were a problem to be solved. "It's delicious, honey," I said, tasting a spoonful. "It's just like I taught you." Karen smiled with genuine pride. For a moment, she seemed like the daughter I remembered. "I learned from the best, Mom," but then she added something that confirmed to me there was no hope. "When you're living with us, you can teach me more recipes. Sylvia is very excited to learn your cooking secrets." The way she said, "when you're living with us" wasn't an invitation. It was a declaration, a decision already made without consulting me. "Karen," I said with the same sweetness as always, "what if I don't want to go live with you?" She laughed nervously. "Oh, Mom, don't say that. Where else are you going to go? You can't live alone anymore, especially after this illness." There was the truth. It had finally come out. According to Karen, I no longer had options. I no longer had a voice. I no longer had the right to decide about my own life. I had been declared incompetent without a trial, without consultation, without my consent. But what Karen didn't know was that her mother had just recovered something she had lost years ago. The will to fight. "You're right, honey," I said softly. "One isn't in shape to live alone anymore." Karen sighed in relief, thinking she had won. "I'm so glad you understand, Mom. You'll see how well we're going to take care of you." I nodded, took her hand in mine, and looked her in the eyes with all the love a mother can feel for a daughter. "Karen, I want you to know something important." She leaned in expectantly. "Throughout your life, I have been here for you, through thick and thin, always." She nodded emotionally. "I know, Mom. And now we are going to be there for you." I smiled and added something that would leave her thinking. "I just hope that when all this is over, you can sleep peacefully at night." Karen's expression changed. There was something in my tone she couldn't identify, but it unsettled her. "Why do you say that, Mom?" I released her hand gently. "For nothing in particular, honey. Just the thoughts of a sick woman." But we both knew that wasn't true. There was something different in my voice. In the way I was observing her, for the first time in years, Karen seemed unsure about what I was thinking, and that gave me the first small satisfaction of what was to come. That afternoon, when Karen left to take care of some business, I knew exactly what business it was. She was surely going to meet with Sylvia and Charles to accelerate the transfer of my property. She surely thought she had to hurry before I suspected anything. What she didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead of her. Leonard had promised to return the next day with all the documents needed to halt the fraud. But more than that, he had promised to help me teach my daughter a lesson she would never forget. While waiting for night to fall, I reflected on the changes I had seen in Karen since she married Jason. She used to be an independent, hard-working woman, proud of fending for herself, but Jason had arrived with his ideas of financial optimization and leveraging family opportunities. Little by little, he had turned my daughter into someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of robbing her own mother while she was in the hospital. Nurse Lucy arrived for the night shift and immediately noticed something had changed in me. "You look different, Mrs. Harrison. More, I don't know how to say it, stronger." I smiled and replied with something that surprised myself. "It's just that I remembered something I had forgotten, dear. I remembered that I know how to take care of myself too." Lucy stayed silent for a moment. Then she nodded, as if she understood perfectly what I meant. "Sometimes we need to be betrayed to remember our own strength," she said while checking my IV. Her words stayed with me all night. The next day, Karen arrived earlier than usual. She held papers in her hand and wore that determined expression she put on when she wanted to get her way. "Mom, I need you to sign these documents," she told me without preamble. "They are to make it easier for me to help you with your bank accounts when you leave the hospital." I looked at the papers without touching them. After decades working in a law firm, I knew a power of attorney when I saw one. "And is this urgent?" I asked softly. "Very urgent," Karen replied, avoiding my gaze. The bank says we need to do the paperwork before Friday. For the first time in my life, I looked at my daughter and didn't see the child I had raised. I saw a woman desperate to appropriate something that didn't belong to her. I saw someone capable of lying to her sick mother without any remorse. And in that moment, I made the hardest decision of my life. "Karen," I said with a calm that surprised me, "I am not going to sign anything until you explain exactly what is happening with my house." The color drained from her face as if she had seen a ghost. "What? What do you mean, Mom?" Her voice had become a whisper. "I mean, I know about the deed transfer. I mean, I know about the loans you've taken out in my name. I mean, I know about Sylvia and Charles. And I know you have been robbing me while I fought not to die." The silence that followed was deafening. Karen stood next to my bed like a statue, the papers trembling in her hands. "Mom, I can explain," she began, but I raised my hand, interrupting her with a gesture I hadn't used with her since she was a teenager. "No," I said with a firmness I didn't know I still had. "You don't need to explain anything. I understand perfectly." Karen started to cry, but they weren't tears of repentance. They were tears of frustration because her plan had been discovered. "Mom, please understand. We just want to take care of you. The house is too big for you. The money is better managed by us. It's for your own good." Her words caused me such deep disappointment that for a moment I was left breathless. My own daughter was talking to me, as if I were a child incapable of managing her own life. "Karen," I told her with a voice I had never used with her, "in 72 years of life I have learned many things. One of the most important is that when someone says they are doing something for your own good without consulting you, they are actually doing it for their own good." She stopped crying and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Fear. "Mom, what are we going to do?" Her question confirmed that she knew perfectly well that what she had done was wrong, that she knew she had betrayed my trust in the vilest way possible. "I am going to do what I should have done years ago," I replied with a tranquility that filled me with peace. "I am going to remind you who I really am." At that moment, Leonard entered the room with 2 other men in suits I didn't recognize. "Eleanor," he said formally, "these are investigators from the district attorney's fraud unit who will be handling the case. Are you ready to proceed?" I looked at Karen one last time, seeing complete panic in her eyes. "I am ready, Leonard, completely ready." Karen ran toward the door, but one of the investigators stopped her politely. "Miss Karen Harrison, we need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding certain documents." Karen looked at me with an expression of desperate pleading. "Mom, please, I'm your daughter. You can't do this to me." I looked at her with all the love and all the sadness a mother can feel, and told her the words that would change our lives forever. "Karen, you decided I was too old to manage my own life. Now I am going to prove you were wrong." As they took her away for questioning, I stayed alone in my hospital bed, feeling for the first time in years that I had control over my destiny. The pneumonia was still there. My lungs still hurt, but my spirit was stronger than ever. I had recovered something I thought I had lost forever: my dignity. And this was just the beginning. Karen and her accomplices were about to discover they had chosen the wrong victim, because Eleanor Harrison still had many cards to play, and they were all winners. Leonard returned the next day with news that confirmed my worst suspicions and my best hopes at once. "Eleanor," he said, sitting next to my bed with that serious expression I knew well, "I have all the information about what Karen and the Millers tried to do." He opened his folder and showed me documents that froze my blood. "The transfer of your house was done with a quitclaim deed using a rather poorly forged signature. Any handwriting expert could prove you didn't write this." I looked at the papers, and indeed, someone had tried to imitate my handwriting but had failed miserably. "Furthermore," Leonard continued, "we discovered that Karen has been applying for credit cards in your name for the last 6 months. The total amounts to $35,000. My heart stopped for a moment. It wasn't just my house. It was my name, my reputation, my credit history built over decades of honest work. How is it possible they could do all this without me knowing?" I asked, feeling a mixture of rage and discouragement. Leonard sighed. "Karen had copies of your ID documents, your social security number. With that and knowing your personal data, she could forge your signature on various documents. It's a federal crime, Eleanor. It's not just fraud, it's identity theft." As I processed this information, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure power. Not power over others, but power over my own life. Leonard, I said with a clarity that surprised me, I want you to cancel absolutely everything Karen has signed in my name. Everything. And I want her and the Millers to pay back every last dime they have stolen. Leonard smiled with satisfaction. That is exactly what I expected to hear from you, and I have more news. Since you are hospitalized, we can proceed with all the paperwork from here. Karen won't be able to do anything else without us knowing. That morning, Karen arrived at the hospital accompanied by Jason and her in-laws. From the moment they entered the room, I could sense the desperation in their movements. Karen had eyes swollen from crying. Jason looked nervous and sweaty, and the Millers showed that aggression that arises when plans go wrong. Mom, Karen began with a trembling voice, we need to talk. There was a misunderstanding yesterday with the gentleman who came. I observed her calmly, feeling for the first time in years that I had complete control of the situation. There was no misunderstanding, Karen, I replied with a voice that sounded strangely serene. Even to me, there were only consequences. Sylvia Miller approached my bed with that fake smile she had perfected over years. Mrs. Harrison, I think there is confusion. We were only trying to help Karen with the paperwork to take better care of you when you left the hospital. I looked her directly in the eye, and for the first time in my life, I didn't try to be polite to someone who didn't deserve it. Mrs. Miller, I told her with icy courtesy. In 72 years of life, I have met many types of people, and I have learned to distinguish between those who want to help and those who want to take advantage. Your fake smile disappeared instantly. Charles stepped forward, trying to intimidate me with that masculine arrogance some men think works on older women. Mrs. Harrison, I think you don't understand the situation. Karen is your only family. We are part of that family now. What is yours belongs to the family. His words caused a laugh I couldn't contain. A laugh that came from the deepest part of my being, filled with years of experience and accumulated wisdom. Mr. Miller, I said when I finished laughing, what is mine, and what you stole you are going to return. Every dollar, every document, every lie you have told about me, the silence that followed was so tense you could cut it with a knife. For the first time since I met them, these 4 adults looked at me as if they finally understood who they were dealing with. Karen approached my bed and tried to take my hand, but for the first time in her life, I pulled it away. Mom, please, she begged with genuine tears. I'm your daughter. Everything we did was thinking of your well-being. You can't live alone anymore, especially after this illness. You need someone to take care of you. Her words brought back memories of everything I had sacrificed for her, and those memories gave me the strength to tell her something I never thought I would have to say. Karen, I said, looking at her with all the love and all the disappointment a mother can feel. For 45 years I took care of you, clothed you, fed you, educated you. I worked double shifts to pay for your college. I sold my jewelry to buy you your first car. I mortgaged my house to help you with your divorce. And this is how you pay me back? Robbing me when I am most vulnerable? Karen was sobbing uncontrollably now. Mom, I love you. I did all this for love. I shook my head slowly. No, Karen. You did this for greed. Love doesn't steal. Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't betray. Jason tried to intervene with that salesman chatter he used for everything. Mrs. Harrison, I think you are misinterpreting our intentions. We want to take care of you, but we also want to protect your assets. If something happens to you, what is going to happen to everything you have worked for all your life? I looked at him with the contempt he had inspired in me since the day I met him. Jason, I said with a calm that seemed to scare him more than if I had shouted, my assets are exactly that, mine, and I decide what happens to them. Not you, not Karen, not your in-laws. Nurse Lucy entered to check my vitals. The tension in the room was so obvious that she immediately asked if everything was okay. Everything is perfectly fine, dear, I replied without taking my eyes off my unwanted visitors. These people are leaving now. Karen looked at me with desperation. Mom, you can't throw us out like this. We are family. I smiled with a deep sadness that reached my bones. Karen, family is built with love, respect, and trust. You destroyed all 3. Sylvia Miller made one last desperate attempt. Mrs. Harrison, you cannot live alone. Look where you are now. In a hospital. Sick. What is going to happen next time? Her words touched a nerve, but not in the way she expected. They reminded me that I had indeed been sick, vulnerable, and that they had taken advantage of that vulnerability to betray me. "Mrs. Miller," I said with a firmness that surprised me, "I prefer to live alone and dignified than accompanied by thieves." When they finally left, Karen turning one last time with that expression of desperate pleading, I remained alone, processing what had just happened. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't lost control. I hadn't let myself be manipulated by tears or threats. For the first time in years, I had defended my rights without apologizing for doing so, and it felt liberating. Nurse Lucy returned an hour later and immediately noticed the change in my mood. "You look different, Mrs. Harrison. Calmer, but also stronger." I smiled and briefly told her what had happened. She listened without judging, nodding occasionally. "Ma'am," she said when I finished, "my grandmother always said there is no worse blind person than the one who doesn't want to see. Sometimes our children think that because they gave us life, or rather, because we gave them life, they can decide how we live it. But you just proved that isn't true." That afternoon, Leonard returned with more news. "Eleanor, the proceedings to cancel all fraudulent transactions are underway. Your house officially returns to your name tomorrow morning. The loans have been declared void due to fraud, and Karen will have to answer legally for everything she did." He sat next to my bed with a satisfied expression. "But I have an important question to ask you. What do you want to do when you leave the hospital?" The question took me by surprise. For days, I had been focused on stopping the theft, recovering what was mine, seeking justice, but I hadn't really thought about the future. "I don't know, Leonard," I admitted. "For years, all my life revolved around Karen and her family. Now that that is over, I'm not sure what follows." Leonard looked at me with understanding. "Eleanor, you are 72 years old, but you are lucid, independent, and you just proved you can defend yourself perfectly. The world is full of possibilities for someone like you." His words made me think of something I had forgotten for years, that I was more than just Karen's mother. I had been a secretary. I had managed family finances. I had raised grandchildren. I had been a wife, friend, neighbor. I had dreams of my own that I had put on pause to care for others. Maybe it was time to remember who I was before becoming solely Karen's mom. That night, as the hospital lights slowly dimmed, I reflected on the memories that had been appearing in my mind during these difficult days. I remembered when Karen was 5 and helped me make cookies, her small hands trying to roll the dough as I taught her. I remembered when she turned 15 and we danced at her party together. She was so beautiful in her pink dress I had sewn during whole nights. I remembered when she graduated from college and hugged me crying, telling me she owed it all to me. At what moment had that loving girl turned into the calculating woman who had betrayed me? When had she started seeing me as an obstacle instead of her mother? Was it gradual, or did it happen suddenly? These questions caused deep pain, but they also gave me clarity. The Karen I had raised no longer existed. In her place was a woman who considered my love something she could take for granted and my assets as something she could take without consequences. The next day, my grandchildren arrived. Dylan, 17, and Fiona, 15. Karen didn't come with them, which indicated she had probably told them some edited version of recent events. "Grandma," Dylan said, hugging me with that tenderness he always had. "Mom says you guys are having family problems and that maybe we won't be able to see you for a while." My heart clenched. These kids were not to blame for their mother's decisions. "My loves," I told them, hugging them with all the strength the IV tubes allowed. "I want you to know that whatever happens between the adults, I am always going to be your grandmother, and I am always going to love you." Fiona, who had always been the most perceptive, looked at me with those intelligent eyes that reminded me of myself at her age. "Grandma, what really happened? Mom says you are confused by the medication, but I see you perfectly lucid." I decided to be honest with them, but in a way they could understand. "My grandchildren, sometimes people make wrong decisions when they are desperate. Your mom made some decisions about my life without consulting me, and I had to defend myself." Dylan frowned. "Mom did something bad, Grandma." I sighed deeply. "Your mom forgot something very important, that respect is earned, not inherited, and that true family is the one that supports you, not the one that takes from you." The children stayed with me all afternoon, telling me about school, their friends, their plans for the future. For a moment, I forgot all the drama and simply enjoyed being a grandmother, but when it was time to leave, Dylan asked me something that broke my heart. "Grandma, can we still visit you when you get out of the hospital?" The question made me understand that Karen had already told them our relationship had ended. "Of course, my love," I told them, hugging them tightly. "You will always be welcome in my life, but you are going to have to be brave and make your own decisions about whether you want to maintain a relationship with me or not." Fiona looked at me with determination. "Grandma, no matter what Mom says, you are our family too." Her words filled me with hope. Perhaps I hadn't lost all my family after all. When they left, I was left thinking about the irony of the situation. Karen had tried to control my life because she thought I could no longer make decisions for myself, but her actions had proven exactly the opposite. I had been able to detect her betrayal, seek legal help, defend myself successfully, and make difficult necessary decisions about my future. If this experience had proven anything, it was that my mind was perfectly clear and my spirit stronger than ever. Leonard arrived at sunset with all the final documents. "Eleanor, officially you have recovered everything that was yours. Your house, your bank accounts, your credit history, everything is clean." He showed me the papers with evident satisfaction. "And there is something else. Karen and the Millers will have to face criminal charges. The district attorney says it is a solid case of fraud and identity theft." For a moment, I felt a pang of maternal pain. Despite everything, Karen was still my daughter. "Leonard," I said after thinking a few minutes. He looked at me surprised. "Eleanor, after everything she did to you, you still want to protect her?" I sighed deeply. I don't want to protect her from the consequences of her acts, but I also don't want my grandchildren to grow up with the trauma of seeing their mother in prison. The lawyer nodded understandingly. "We can negotiate full restitution and community service, but she would have to admit her guilt and pay everything back." That night I slept better than I had slept in weeks, not because everything was resolved, but because I had finally recovered something I had lost without realizing it: control over my own life. For years I had allowed others to make decisions for me, to define my limits, to dictate my options. But this crisis had awakened something in me that had been asleep too long: my own voice. The next day was Friday, and Dr. Roberts gave me the best news I had received in weeks. I was being discharged on Monday. The pneumonia had subsided, my lungs were clear, and my general health had improved significantly. "Mrs. Harrison," Dr. Roberts said, reviewing my chart, "it is notable how your mood has influenced your recovery. You are as good as new." I smiled, knowing exactly why I felt better. I had recovered more than my physical health. I had recovered my dignity. The weekend passed quietly. Karen didn't appear, which confirmed she was probably dealing with the legal consequences of her actions. Jason didn't come either, and the Millers had vanished completely. For the first time in days, I could think about the future without the anxiety of not knowing what trap they were preparing for me. I had my house, my savings, and something more important. I had the certainty that I could take care of myself. On Sunday afternoon, Nurse Lucy came to say goodbye before her shift ended. "Mrs. Harrison," she said, sitting for a moment by my side, "I want to tell you something. In these years working here, I have seen many elderly people who allow their families to take away their autonomy without fighting back. You are the first one I see who fights back, and that is beautiful." Her words filled me with pride, but also with responsibility. If I had managed to defend myself, perhaps I could help others do the same. While packing my few belongings on Sunday night, I reflected on everything that had changed in a week. I had arrived at the hospital as a sick and vulnerable woman. I was leaving as a woman who had rediscovered her inner strength. Karen had tried to steal more than money. She had tried to steal my dignity, my autonomy, my right to decide about my own life. But her plan had failed spectacularly. Not only had I recovered everything that was mine, but I had recovered something even more valuable: self-respect. On Monday morning, while waiting for the taxi that would take me back to my house in Lincoln Park, I thought about Karen one last time. I knew eventually we would have to talk, that we would have to find a way to coexist as mother and daughter after this betrayal, but I also knew things would never be as before. There were lines she had crossed that could not be uncrossed. She had lost my trust in a way that perhaps she could never repair. But strangely, this didn't fill me only with sadness. It also filled me with hope. For the first time in years, my future didn't depend on anyone but me. I was 72, in good health, had my house, my savings, and a mental clarity that had surprised even myself. The world was full of possibilities, and I was ready to explore them. Karen had tried to turn me into a victim, but she had achieved exactly the opposite. She had reminded me that I am a survivor. The taxi left me in front of my house on Monday afternoon, and for the first time in a week, I breathed the air of my own garden. Everything looked exactly the same as when I left in an emergency for the hospital. The hydrangeas I had planted 5 years ago were blooming. The railing my husband had painted black was still shining under the sun, and the small fountain we built together was still murmuring softly. But I was not the same woman who had left here a week ago. That woman would have trusted her daughter blindly. This woman had learned that trust must be earned every day. As I opened the door to my house, I noticed someone had been here during my absence. The furniture was slightly moved, some drawers weren't completely closed, and some family photographs I always had in the living room were missing. Karen had been looking for something, probably important documents, jewelry, or anything of value she could take before I returned. But what she didn't know was that I had learned to hide important things since I was very young. I sat in my favorite armchair, the same one where I had nursed Karen 45 years ago, and dialed Leonard's number. "Leonard, it's Eleanor. I'm home, and I need to tell you something important." I described the evidence that someone had been rummaging through my things. "I'm not surprised," he replied with a tired voice. "Karen has been desperate all week. She even went to my office on Friday, demanding I tell her where you were. Obviously, I didn't tell her anything. What else can I do to protect myself?" I asked, feeling I needed to be several steps ahead of Karen and her accomplices. "Eleanor, I have a proposal that might interest you. How would you feel if we sell the house, and you move to a place where they can't find you easily?" The suggestion took me by surprise. This had been my home for 40 years. Here I had lived with my husband, raised my daughter, built my most precious memories. But it was also true that now these walls were contaminated by betrayal. "Let me think about it," I told him. Although deep down I already knew he was right, I couldn't keep living in a place where Karen could show up whenever she wanted to continue manipulating me. I needed a fresh start, a place where I could live in peace without constantly looking over my shoulder. "Meanwhile," Leonard added, "I'm going to get the locks changed today, and I'm going to install a basic security system. Karen can no longer enter here without your permission." That afternoon, while waiting for the locksmiths, the phone rang. It was Karen, and her voice sounded desperate. "Mom, please, we need to talk. I've been trying to go to the house, but my key doesn't work anymore." I kept my voice calm and neutral. "Karen, Attorney Vance changed the locks for security. Apparently, someone entered my house while I was in the hospital." The silence on the other end of the line was revealing. "Mom, it was me who entered. I needed to find your health insurance documents for the hospital. And were the family photographs also for health insurance?" I asked with a tranquility that seemed to scare her more than if I had shouted. Karen stammered something incomprehensible. "Mom, please, let me come explain everything. There are many things you don't understand. For the first time in 45 years, I told my daughter something I never thought I would have to say. Karen, I understand perfectly. I understand that you robbed me. I understand that you lied to me. I understand that you betrayed me when I was most vulnerable. And I understand that you are going to have to live with the consequences of those decisions." "Mom, I'm your daughter," Karen shouted into the phone with genuine desperation. "You can't treat me like a stranger." Her words caused me deep sadness, but also absolute clarity. "Karen," I told her with all the calm in the world, "you decided to treat me as if I were an obstacle. Now I decide to treat you as what you proved to be, someone I cannot trust." I hung up the phone and unplugged it immediately. For the first time in years, the silence of my house felt peaceful instead of lonely. The following days passed in a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. Sadness for the relationship lost with Karen, but liberation from no longer having to worry about her constant manipulations. Leonard came daily to keep me informed about the legal proceedings. Karen had been officially summoned for fraud, and the Millers also faced charges. "How are you handling all this?" he asked me on Thursday during one of his visits. "Better than I expected," I answered honestly. For years I felt something was wrong in my relationship with Karen, but I didn't know what it was. Now that I know the truth, at least I can make decisions based on reality and not illusions. Leonard nodded understandingly. "That speaks very well of your mental strength, Eleanor. Many people in your situation would sink into depression. You are facing this with admirable dignity. On Friday morning, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I called Leonard and said, I want to sell the house everything, and I want to move somewhere where I can start over." He didn't seem surprised by my decision. Have you thought about where you'd like to go? For years, my husband and I had dreamed of retiring to Naples, Florida, where the climate was perfect and life was quieter. Naples, I said, without hesitation. I always wanted to live in Florida. Perfect, replied Leonard. I know the real estate market there. With what your house in Chicago is worth, you can buy something very nice in Naples and have plenty of money left over to live comfortably. For the first time in weeks, I felt genuine excitement. I wasn't just escaping a toxic situation, I was fulfilling a dream I had held for decades. Karen had tried to steal my house, but inadvertently she had given me the motivation to finally go live where I had always wanted. That afternoon, Karen appeared without warning at my door. She could see me through the window, but she couldn't enter because the locks had been changed. She banged on the door with desperation. "Mom, please, open the door. We need to talk." I remained seated in my armchair, watching her through the curtain. She looked haggard, desperate, completely different from the self-assured woman who had tried to rob me a week ago. But I felt no pity for her. I felt the cold satisfaction of seeing that actions have consequences. "Mom, I know you're there," Karen kept shouting. The neighbors saw her arrive. "Please, just let me explain." But there was nothing to explain. Everything was perfectly clear. She had made her decisions, and I had made mine. After half an hour of shouting and pleading, Karen finally left, but not before shouting one last threat. "Mom, you can't do this. I am your only family. Without me, you have no one." Her final words gave me exactly the motivation I needed for what I had been planning. Karen believed I depended on her, that without her care I would be lost and alone. It was time to show her how wrong she was. That night I called Leonard. "Leonard, I want to speed up the sale of the house, and I want everything done in the utmost secrecy. I don't want Karen to know anything until it's already done." On Tuesday morning, Leonard arrived with extraordinary news. "Eleanor, I found the perfect buyer for your house. It's a young couple, both doctors, who are looking for exactly what you have. They are willing to pay full price, in cash, and can sign this very week." My heart raced. Everything was happening faster than I had imagined. "And the house in Naples? I found it too. It's perfect for you. One story, small garden, close to the center but in a quiet area. You can move next Monday." While signing the sales documents, I felt a mixture of nostalgia and excitement I hadn't experienced in years. I was closing a chapter of my life, but I was also opening a completely new one. "Leonard," I said as I finished signing, "do you think I'm doing the right thing?" He looked at me with that wisdom years of experience give. "Eleanor, you are doing what you need to do to protect yourself and recover your peace. That is always the right thing." On Wednesday, Karen appeared again, this time accompanied by Jason. I saw them from my window arguing outside my house as if it were theirs. Karen rang the doorbell insistently. "Mom, we know you're there. We have to talk." This time I decided to open the door, but not to reconcile. It was to enjoy the moment when they found out what I had done. I opened the door with a serene smile that disconcerted them immediately. "Hello, Karen." "Hello, Jason," I said with the same courtesy I would use with any guest. "How can I help you?" Karen was speechless for a moment. Clearly, she didn't expect this calm reception. "Mom, we came to apologize. It was all a misunderstanding. We never wanted to hurt you." Jason nodded vigorously. "Mrs. Harrison, my parents overstepped. We only wanted to help, but we understand it wasn't the right way." I observed them with curiosity, as if studying rare specimens. "And how do you plan to fix the damage you caused?" I asked, keeping my tone kind but firm. Karen stepped forward eagerly. "We can cancel everything, Mom. We can return the documents, cancel the paperwork. Everything can go back to how it was before." I shook my head gently. "No, Karen, nothing can go back to how it was before, because now I know what you are capable of." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they didn't move me. "Besides," I added with a smile that chilled them to the bone, "it is already too late to cancel anything." Karen and Jason looked at me confused. "What do you mean it's too late?" Jason asked with a nervous voice. I leaned calmly against my doorframe. "I mean, I sold the house yesterday. There are new owners already." The silence that followed was absolute. Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Jason turned pale as a sheet. "Impossible," Karen muttered finally. "You cannot sell without consulting us." Her words caused a genuine laugh that came from the deepest part of my being. Consulting you? Karen, this is my house. I can sell it whenever I feel like it, to whomever I feel like, and for the price I feel like. Jason tried to regain composure. Mrs. Harrison, but where are you going to live? What are you going to do without a house? His question revealed exactly what I expected. They had assumed I was completely dependent on them. That is no longer your business, I replied with a tranquility that seemed to irritate them more than if I had shouted. You decided I was too old to manage my own life. Now you are going to discover how wrong you were. Karen approached desperately. Mom, we are family. You can't just disappear us from your life. I looked at her with deep sadness, but also with iron determination. Karen, you disappeared the mother who knew me when you decided to rob me. Now I am disappearing the daughter I thought I knew. At that moment, the moving truck I had hired in secret appeared. 3 men got out of the vehicle and headed toward my door. Mrs. Eleanor Harrison? Asked the supervisor. We are here for your belongings. Karen and Jason stood paralyzed, watching the workers begin to enter my house to take my things. Mom, Karen whispered with a broken voice. Are you really going to leave without even telling us where? I reflected on her question for a moment. Part of me, the maternal part that had been active for 45 years, wanted to hug her and tell her everything would be okay. But the stronger part of me, the part that had learned to protect itself, knew that revealing my destination would be a mistake. Karen, when you decided to rob me, you didn't consult me about where I was going to live afterward. When you planned to hand me over to your in-laws like a package, you didn't care about my opinion. Now that I make my own decisions, I don't need your approval either. The movers continued loading my belongings, while Karen and Jason remained standing on the sidewalk like 2 powerless statues. I supervised everything from the door, secretly enjoying the irony of the situation. They had planned to control my life, decide where I would live, manage my money, dictate my future, and now they were completely out of control, watching as I made decisions they hadn't even considered possible. Mrs. Harrison, the moving supervisor, told me when they finished loading everything. Do you want us to take you to the new address? I looked one last time at my house. Then I looked at Karen crying on the sidewalk and made the most liberating decision of my life. Yes, let's go. Karen ran toward me in a last desperate attempt. Mom, please, at least tell me if you are okay. Tell me where I can find you. I stopped by the truck door and told her the last words she would hear from me in a long time. Karen, when you learn to value people instead of using them, maybe we can talk. Until then, take care. The trip to the airport and the flight to Florida felt like a journey through time. With every mile that took us away from Chicago, I felt I was shedding years of manipulation, guilt, and living the life others had decided for me. When I arrived at my new house in Naples, a small but perfect construction with a garden, lanai, and a beautiful view of palm trees, I knew I had made the right decision. The house in Naples was everything I had dreamed of. 1 story, 2 bedrooms, spacious kitchen, living room with large windows, and most importantly, a garden where I could plant all the flowers I wanted. While directing the workers to place my furniture, I felt an emotion I hadn't experienced in decades, the thrill of creating a home that was completely mine, where no one else would have the right to have an opinion on how I lived my life. That night, sitting on my new lanai under the Florida stars, I reflected on everything that had happened in the last 2 weeks. I had arrived at the hospital as a sick and dependent woman. I had faced the greatest betrayal of my life. I had discovered reserves of strength I didn't know I had, and now I was starting a new life completely on my own. At 72 years old, if someone had told me a month ago that this was possible, I would have laughed in their face. Leonard called me on Saturday morning. Eleanor, how are you feeling in your new home? His voice sounded cheerful, satisfied. I feel free, Leonard. For the first time in years, I feel completely free. He laughed softly. I am very glad to hear that. And I have news about Karen and the Millers. They signed an agreement to restitute all the money they stole and perform community service. They won't go to jail, but they will have criminal records. And Karen? I asked, feeling a pang of maternal worry I couldn't avoid. Karen is, let's say she is learning what it means to live without your financial support. Jason had to sell the car to pay part of the restitution. The Millers cut all ties with them when they realized they wouldn't get the house. And Karen is working double shifts to be able to pay the rest of what she owes. For a moment I felt sorry for her, but then I remembered these were the natural consequences of her own decisions. On Sunday, I decided to explore my new neighborhood. Naples was everything I had imagined. Quiet streets, friendly people, a pace of life that allowed me to breathe deeply for the first time in years. At the local farmer's market, an older lady noticed I was new to the area. "Did you just move, ma'am?" she asked while we picked avocados together. "Yes," I replied. "I decided it was time for a change in my life." She smiled understandingly. "How brave. Not many people our age dare to start over." Her words made me reflect on what I had really achieved. I hadn't just escaped an abusive situation. I had proven I was capable of making important decisions, defending myself legally, completely reorganizing my life. I had proven that age was not synonymous with incapacity, that experience was a strength, not a weakness. Karen had tried to take away my autonomy, but she had achieved exactly the opposite. She had restored my confidence in my own decision-making ability. During the following week, I established routines that filled me with satisfaction. I woke up early, watered my garden, prepared my favorite breakfast without having to worry about anyone else's preferences. I went to the market when I wanted, bought what I liked, talked to my new neighbors without having to give explanations about my family. For the first time in decades, my time was completely mine. Rose, my next-door neighbor, quickly became my first friend in Naples. She was a 6'8" woman, a widow like me, but with contagious energy. "Eleanor," she told me one Tuesday while we drank coffee in her garden. "I don't know what life you led before, but now you look like a completely new woman." Her words made me realize something important. It wasn't that I had changed, it was that I had finally returned to being who I really was. Leonard visited me 2 weeks after my move. "Eleanor," he said, admiring my new garden, "I have to admit that when I met you 20 years ago, I never imagined I would see you so radiant in a situation like this." I smiled, serving him coffee on the lanai. "You know what's strangest, Leonard? I don't feel like I've lost a daughter. I feel like I've recovered a life." "Have you heard anything from Karen?" he asked with genuine curiosity. "Nothing directly," I replied, "but my grandchildren have been calling me. Dylan got my new number, I don't know how, and we've been talking in the afternoons." Leonard looked relieved to hear that. "I'm glad to know you haven't lost all your family." I nodded, feeling a warmth in my chest, thinking of Dylan and Fiona. Grandchildren are different. They love me for who I am, not for what I have. That weekend, Dylan and Fiona came to visit me for the first time. They had convinced a distant uncle to drive them down, telling him they wanted to see their grandmother. When I saw them get out of the car, I ran toward them with an energy I hadn't felt in months. "Grandma," Fiona shouted, hugging me tightly. Dylan, who was already almost as tall as me, hugged me with that tenderness he always had. "Grandma, are you happy here?" "Happier than I have been in years," I answered honestly while taking them to see their new house. I showed them every corner, talked about my plans for the garden, told them about my new neighbors. "And Mom?" Fiona asked cautiously. "When are you going to forgive Mom?" I sat with them on the lanai and explained something I hoped they could understand. "My grandchildren, forgiving doesn't mean allowing someone to continue hurting you. Sometimes true love requires setting boundaries." Dylan, who had always been mature for his age, nodded thoughtfully. "Grandma, Mom says you are confused by age and medication, but I see you perfectly fine, even better than before." His words confirmed to me that Karen was spreading lies about my mental state to justify her actions. "Dylan," I said, taking his hands in mine, "I want you and Fiona to know the complete truth about what happened." And for the next hour, I told them everything, every detail, every lie, every attempted theft. When I finished my story, Fiona had tears in her eyes. "Grandma, I can't believe Mom did that." Dylan looked angry and disillusioned. I knew something was wrong. Mom and Dad Jason had been talking a lot about money lately and always stopped talking when I entered the room. My grandchildren's honesty gave me the validation I needed. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't confused, I had been betrayed and had every right to protect myself. When they left that Sunday afternoon, promising me they would return soon, I stayed in my garden reflecting on the future. For the first time in decades, that future was a blank page I could fill however I wanted. I didn't have to consult anyone. I didn't have to consider others' needs before mine. I didn't have to justify my decisions to anyone. This freedom scared me a little, but it also excited me deeply. That night, while preparing dinner just for me, using the ingredients I liked and cooking exactly the amount I was going to eat, I understood something fundamental. I had confused love with complacency. For years, I had believed that loving Karen meant saying yes to everything, giving her everything she asked for, sacrificing my needs for hers. But true love also includes boundaries, consequences, and the expectation of mutual respect. Karen had never learned that because I had never taught her, but now it was different. Now she was learning that her actions have consequences, that she couldn't take what wasn't hers without paying the price, that her mother wasn't an infinite resource she could exploit without limits. And I was learning something equally important, that it is never too late to recover your dignity, to take control of your life, to decide who deserves to be in your world and who doesn't. While preparing to sleep in my new house, in my new bed, in my new life, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't the peace of resignation or defeat. It was the peace of someone who has fought for what belongs to her and won. Karen had tried to make me a victim, but she had achieved exactly the opposite. She had made me the heroine of my own story, and this story was just beginning. 6 months after moving to Florida, my new life had blossomed in ways I never imagined possible. I woke up every morning without the anxiety of wondering what new manipulation I would have to face that day. My garden had become my pride. Roses, geraniums, hibiscus, and even a small herb garden. Rose had become my best friend, and together we had formed a book club with other women in the neighborhood. For the first time in decades, my time was completely mine. Leonard visited me monthly to keep me informed. Karen complied with the full restitution and finished her community service, he told me during his October visit. Have you tried to contact her? I poured coffee into my new ceramic mugs. No, Leonard, and she hasn't tried to contact me either. Her absence didn't hurt like before. It was liberating. My grandchildren visited every other week. Dylan and Fiona had found a way to take a long bus ride or catch a cheap flight from Chicago. During a visit in November, Fiona told me, "Grandma, Mom cries a lot on Sundays, which were the days we came to visit you," Dylan added with maturity. "She says she lost the most important person in her life." I hugged them, understanding they were not to blame for their mother's decisions. One day in December, Rose came running with her phone. "Eleanor, there is a woman crying who says she is your daughter. She says it's an emergency." My heart raced. "Karen? What happened?" Her voice sounded broken. "Mom, Fiona is in the hospital. She had an accident. She's okay, but I need you to be here, please." Without hesitating, I said, "Which hospital?" "General Hospital." Her voice was a whisper. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but Fiona is asking for you." The trip back to Chicago was surreal. I was returning as a woman who had found her strength. When I arrived at the hospital, Karen looked haggard, as if she had aged 5 years in 6 months. Upon seeing me, she ran over sobbing. "Mom, I didn't know if you would come." "I came for Fiona," I told her, separating myself gently. "Only for Fiona." I spent 2 hours with my granddaughter, who had a fractured wrist but was fine. Karen waited in the hallway, respecting the space I had established. When Fiona fell asleep, I went out to where Karen was sitting. She looked broken, completely different. "Mom, I know I have no right to talk to you, but not a day goes by that I don't regret it." I sat down, keeping my distance. "Regret is the first step, Karen, but it doesn't erase actions or repair broken trust. Is there any way you will forgive me someday?" she asked with genuine humility. "Forgiveness isn't asked for, Karen. It is earned by demonstrating real changes, not with words." "What would I have to do?" I reflected carefully. "You would have to prove you understand it was a calculated betrayal of the one who loved you most." Karen broke down completely. "Yes, it was a calculated betrayal, and I am unforgivable." Seeing her so broken caused me maternal pain, but also confirmation that she finally understood. Over the next few hours, we had the most honest conversation in years. Karen told me about the financial pressures, about how Jason and his parents convinced her. "But Mom, the truth is, I also thought you would never find out, that you were too trusting." "That was your worst mistake," I replied, confusing trust with stupidity. In the following months, I began receiving letters from Karen, not invasive calls, but handwritten letters that Leonard delivered to me. Karen told me about her life, how she had gotten a second job, how Jason had changed when he lost financial support, how she had started therapy. One letter impacted me especially. Mom, I thought a mother's love was unconditional, but I confused love with complacency. Real love includes boundaries and expectations of mutual respect. During the fall, my grandchildren told me Karen had changed a lot. Grandma, Dylan told me, Mom says you are teaching her the most important lesson of her life, even if from a distance. Their words made me reflect. Perhaps my distancing wasn't just to protect myself, but to allow Karen to grow. For Christmas, I received a different letter. Instead of apologies, Karen sent a report of her finances and a proposal. Could I come visit you just so you see I am different? The letter included photographs that impacted me. Karen looked different, thinner, but stronger, with hands calloused from honest work. In the photos, she appeared in a community soup kitchen and in group therapy. They weren't photos of manipulation. They were photos of real transformation. After reflecting, I decided to give her a chance. You can come on Saturday, January 15th, on my terms, in my house, and alone. Her response was simple. Thank you, Mom. I will be there. On Saturday, Karen arrived in a public taxi. She no longer had a car. She looked completely different, stronger, without pretensions. Hi, Mom. Thank you for allowing me to come, she said simply. She didn't try to hug me dramatically. For 2 hours, she told me about her life. She had lost her job. She had kicked Jason out when he became abusive. The Millers had disappeared. Mom, I lost everything I thought mattered, and I realized the only thing that really mattered was what I had destroyed. Leaving, Karen asked. Are you happy here? I looked at her with total honesty. I am happier than I have been in years. I have recovered my peace, my autonomy, my dignity. She nodded sadly. And I am glad you are happy. You deserve it. As she walked away, I reflected on the visit. I had seen genuine changes, but real changes take time. For the first time in months, I felt a small hope that perhaps we could have a relationship based on mutual respect. That night, walking through my garden under the stars, I understood something fundamental. It hadn't just been about escaping abuse. It had been about rediscovering my strength, about learning that it is never too late to take control of your life, about understanding that true love includes boundaries. Karen had tried to destroy me, but she had set me free. The next month, I began volunteer work at a senior center, helping people in similar situations recognize abuse and find their voice. My experience with Karen hadn't just been a personal tragedy, it had been a lesson that could help others. Today, a year later, I wake up every morning grateful. I have my house, my garden, friends who respect me, and the certainty that I can take care of myself. Karen continues sending letters, showing her growth, and perhaps someday we can rebuild something, but I no longer depend on that to be happy. And I understood the most important lesson of all. It is never too late to start over, to defend what is yours, to live on your own terms. Karen wanted to turn me into a dependent victim, but she achieved the opposite. She reminded me that I am an independent survivor, and for the first time in years, I am truly grateful to be alive.